Hey, I'm Kira Carey and welcome to Cloudsmith's monthly webinar on all things DevOps and supply chain security. Excuse my crookiness. For our final webinar 2022, it has to be on the state of the DevOps in 2022. So we've assembled a panel of experts to look back on the year and discuss our learnings and trends. So before we get started, let's go through a few housekeeping notes. We're going to be randomly drawing for prize packs at the end of the webinar, so stay till the end to be in with a chance to win. We're streaming on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our webinar platform. So if you want to ask a question, just use whatever streaming tool you're using, the chat function, or tweet, and our very own Hillary will be monitoring them and sending them back to me. We'll also have a poll. So again, send in your answers on whatever streaming platform you're using, and Hillary will give all her findings to me. So, let's kick off. Our topic is on the state of the DevOps in 2022. There's lots of stuff happening in 2022. Like, how has our developer tooling changed? Are we getting any better at developing software? Has software supply chain security changed our developer practices? There's loads of reports out there at the moment. The DORA report, Linear B have a report on the languages with the best workflows. Circle CI have a report on delivering software. That's the Stack Overflow survey of developers. So there's so much out there. And we are joined today by two representatives from the DevOps community, from Circle CI and Linear B. So this is a great opportunity to bring them on stage. Aisling Conroy and Luke Kilpatrick.
Hello, Kira.
Hey,
Hello, Kira.
Aisling. Hey, Luke. So I'll introduce you. You don't have to introduce yourself. So Aisling Conroy is a senior manager of competitive intelligence in Circle CI. So Circle CI is a CI/CD platform, and it helps you build, test, and all those automated things when you're building software. And Luke Kilpatrick is the director of developer relations in Linear B. Linear B focuses on developer workflow tools, so finding those bottlenecks and helping you build better software faster. So I'll start with you, Aisling. I actually worked with Aisling. We were in the same section in Hewlett Packard. Like, it was probably a while ago now, like, oh gosh, 10 years.
It's going back in history, all right, yeah. It feels like a different world.
I know, yeah, it was a lovely team. But you were doing competitive intelligence like right out of college, basically. What is it? Like, it seems like a long time to be doing it seems like a new thing, competitive intelligence, but what exactly is that?
Yeah, I was really lucky to find competitive intelligence so soon after college. So I've had literally over 10 years working in competitive intelligence now. And it can mean different things in different sectors. And like you say, I think it is becoming more mainstream, or more people are aware of competitive intelligence. But what it really is, or why I love doing it every day, is that I spend my time kind of tracking all the major market trends that are happening, particularly for DevOps. And hopefully that's what we're going to get into talking about today. I'll take all that and kind of match it with what I know to be like some really important trends that make the most, which are most important for Circle CI, and kind of take them, make them insightful, and see based on that, well, what would we do differently from a product or from a business perspective, like, and help that make business decisions. And also it has the benefit as well of knowing it really helps sharpen of like, okay, where is our product different versus what everyone else is doing. So it gets to
one thing in DevOps is like there's so many tools and there's actually a lot of overlap between it's like, are they my competitor or are we like okay? You find that or
there's a whole lot of that. And the other great thing about DevOps as well is that different from other places and in product categories, everything's open. You know, everyone talks about stuff and shares. So there's a lot of information to get through. And like you mentioned, all the reports as well of being able to see how trends are adapting over the year. So yeah, it's definitely rich in being able to get a lot of information and build a lot of insights out of it.
Yeah, so, and Luke. So, Luke Kilpatrick is from Linear B. Last time I saw him was at a conference and his presentation didn't work and he just like winged it and it was like perfect. So I was super impressed. I would have been out of there. So, but I think you were talking about Gitstream. Do you want to talk a bit about that or?
Here we go. Here we go. The presentation worked. The screen did not work. My presentation was fine. It was the
Yeah.
So I did the presentation off the Gitstream website, and everybody had everybody go to it on the laptops. So I had record web traffic for the product that we released like 5 days before the conference. So it was in New York, and it was a great thing. And just to clarify, I'm our director of developer experience, and developer experience means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and we can go into that a little bit later. But the main thing that Gitstream does is, we've done a really great job of optimizing that ops pipeline. Once you get something into the continuous integration and you can start working it through the chain to get it deployed, we've done really good as an industry on that. The problem is that there's still humans involved. And the more humans you involve, the slower everything gets. And
get him out of here, yeah.
yeah, and a lot of times when you put humans in, you kind of do a one size fits all approach and you treat all humans the same. And there's there's a lot of ideas where treating all humans the same is great, and there's a lot of ideas of treating, when it comes to code, there's a lot of differentiation between different people when it comes to code review. And so that's something that we're trying to help solve and speed up, and that's what Gitstream does.
Cool. So let's get started on our topic. So Ashleen, I'm gonna ask you first. What do you think is one of the top trends of 2022 with DevOps?
With DevOps, yeah, that's the thing. Because I mean, 2022, I mean, every year is exciting and interesting and different. But certainly this year, I think when I was back in 2021, looking into the year ahead and the kind of energy and types of plans that I saw a lot of people have, it was on this grand scale. And I think over the year, a lot did get done. But maybe just given, I mean, I'm reminded of that, like that boxing phrase is like, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's kind of what it felt like in 2022. But I'd say, okay, at the end of the year, whatever about what the plans we started with, a lot was accomplished by the end. A lot of trends emerged. And I heard someone put it this way that I thought was really good. 2022, the year of the dry kiss. What they meant by that was that drier, things are getting a lot more, don't repeat yourself, things are getting a lot more efficient. There's a lot of focus on tooling and kind of new features to help people spend less time on the manual stuff and become more efficient. And the KISS, keep it simple. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on simplicity. And I look at open source tools, other tools where there's a great focus on interoperability. Let's make it really easy to, whatever this thing does, make it work really easy with all the other things we know people use as well. And then I guess maybe also kind of on the easiness side, there definitely was a move that I saw of a lot of products becoming more broad or being able to account for a lot more different use cases. So like specifically having something that helps specific types of programming languages, or maybe work specifically with new operating systems. So that's where I saw things kind of become more about efficiency, simplicity, and just, like we said, things are complex. People are dealing with a lot, and these kinds of things I think helped a lot in this year.
Yeah, yeah. Like I know one of the top, well, one of the trends I saw was in open source. One of the newest kind of open source product that's really like people have started adopting is like Sigstore, and a big part of that was like to make signing simple, and that's really part of that supply chain security trend, I suppose. So, and what about you, Luke? What was your top trend from 2022?
So my big top trend is I'm focused a lot more on the dev side versus the ops side of DevOps, but I also been seeing a big trend to bring kind of this new role, new area, and it's been sort of happening the last 2 years of developer experience, or also called platform engineering, where we're seeing teams where a good chunk of the people are writing the feature code to get the next thing, but then there's also usually like a senior team or other people that are focused really on those tool chains, on making that developer experience better, making the ops experience better, and really focusing on you know getting that code all the way through from it being written to deployment, and actually spending time and looking at that. And some of the most advanced devs are kind of in that area, and they're titling a lot of it developer experience and developer or platform engineering. And it's almost like this evolution of DevOps that we've been seeing is going to this sort of that next step is, okay, we figured out DevOps, but now we need to look at this whole thing holistically. DevOps has always been, I've always said it's as much of a people problem as a technology problem. And by bringing these new words into focusing on developer experience and technology experience and how that affects your day to day, I think that's been a really big trend. And I think bringing more of the humanness to your thing. So when you automate something, great, but are you automating to save time, or are you automating to save reliability, and how those things are happening, and trying to get the platform, have one that's responsible, because we all know there's tons of tools in the chain, and having people that are responsible for bringing those tools together as their full-time job, rather than it being, oh yeah, we got a bunch of devs and they kind of all do SRE and they all kind of do DevOps and they all kind of do this. Having people that are actually dedicated experts to this thing, and actually, uh, I'll use the other methodology of DRY, of directly responsible individuals for those tool chains, and getting those in place, I think has become a big trend. And I
Yeah.
think it's a good way that we're moving as an industry.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago I was working as a developer, and um, we were moving to the cloud and we were containerizing everything, and I felt like I was learning something new like every week, but that was like a bad thing. you know, like I was like, I wasn't an expert at everything, and like I was sure to make configuration mistakes, and it seems to be a lot of focus on realizing that if you want developers to be produce better code, that you need to take some of that configuration work away from them, take some of that, uh, I suppose, like that platform work, and so have people in specific roles and not do everything themselves, and how that can improve efficiency. And then also maybe even there's less on-plan stuff, because it's not like, oh, you're learning something new. It's that you're working on your code, which is
Yeah.
always
I really like the restaurant metaphor. You got developers that are chefs; they're there cooking, but having that platform engineering team being like the sous chef, being able to prep everything already so that they can cook quickly, and then they rotate back and forth. So most high-end chefs are only as good as their sous chef. If you don't have a good sous chef prepping your world for you, your restaurant's going to fail and everything's going to blow up and the waiters are going to come, it's just a mess. Whereas if you've got those two teams working together, and a lot of times I'm seeing people doing, okay, one sprint we're going to go do platform, where the platform team, the next sprint we're going to be developing new features, and then you swap back and forth so that people get chances to cross pollinate, so that, hey, people can take vacations, but also you get that you get the whole system is viewed as a platform. Like, you're actually, everybody's trying to go to platforms, so it's not just we're all working on the accounting app. It's, no, we have a platform that this business runs on, and whether it's internal apps, external apps, however you're doing it, everything's got to talk to each other. Everything needs an API, and all those APIs need to be configured specifically for every company and use case.
yeah,
That's really
actually.
interesting that you mentioned the restaurant example, because I know I read a great book from Jeff Lawson recently, Ask Your Developer. He's CEO at Twilio, but he actually had I think a Michelin star chef come in and chat to his team about platform teams and about the focus on the customer. Try to think more like the sous chef example. You're all working creatively on something together. Let's do it well as a team. So I think there's definitely a parallel there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of the reports as well, Ashley, are like talking about how CI/CD is so important. Sometimes, like when you're working in DevOps, you're kind of, and you're going to these conferences, you kind of presume that everybody already has all these things, that everybody has version control, surely everybody has CI/CD, but it's not like everywhere. There's
I always like the quote, the future is here, but it's not evenly distributed.
Mm. That
Um,
captures it very nicely.
yeah, and yeah, we've done a lot of our research. Where we found our problem was we've actually, most companies that are adopting Linear B are younger, cloud first, mid-sized startups, medium-sized companies. The legacy enterprise, or the older enterprise companies, they still have a lot of systems, you know, on-prem, cloud, hybrid, all these different systems, and they're but because that biases our information a little bit for our research. But we've got these adopters that are using Linear B, which is a metrics package that kind of looks over your whole developer team. But we found where the bottleneck was in the PRs and that code review. And so we came up with this thing. A lot of our customers, the CI/CD stuff is working great. They've got that good, and their bottleneck is actually human. And so we came out with Gitstream as a way to start to put almost like the same idea of like CI and CD, which is automating the deployment and the integration. We're now trying to help automate the merging, and we've come with this term continuous merge, where you have a YAML file, because we all in DevOps, we all love YAML files, right? Everybody needs a YAML file. You get a YAML file, you get a YAML file, uh, and but basically you define how to merge code, because a lot of times how to merge code in a developer team, it kind of becomes a dark art. Sometimes it's all stored in one guy's head. Sometimes it's written down. Sometimes it's a README file. But we always like anything that we can put as code, configuration as code, merging as code, anything that you can code and automate, you can get agreement on, you can get it under source control, and it helps you get to, because we all want to get to production faster, and then we want production to stay up. Those are the two things. I think that's rule number one of a DevOps team: is get it to production and keep it up.
yeah. And so do you find that is it like trying to encourage people to have smaller PRs? Is that a big or is it
That's
finding
like
the
a
right
step one.
people? Is
Like
that
that's like the
stuff?
step is that's like your step zero. Like small PRs are better, but the other problem is PRs are expensive. They take time. You're taking at minimum 2 developers going back and forth on the PR to get it into merge, right? So you're sucking up 2 very expensive, highly paid developers potentially, to do that, and going back and forth. But do you really need 2 developers to change to code review a white space change in a documentation? Or if you're writing a whole bunch of tests, do you really need that reviewed? They pass the test or not? So it's getting this right sizing. Whereas if someone's doing a configuration change on your production environment, or trying to working on your Helm charts or any of the other, doing your Circle CI configuration, um, you want someone to spend a good hour or half hour making sure all your keys are correct, making sure that that's right. You might want 3 pairs of eyes on that. So it's getting that right sizing, the amount of review and the amount of humanness looking over before it hits your CI/CD pipeline. Because sometimes if it hits your CI pipeline, it might already be too late, or it's gonna fail, and it's gonna get back to the developer, and you're slowing down again.
And it's talking about failed tests. Ashleen, have you seen like a focus on trying to improve flaky tests? Is that like it feels like I've heard a lot about flaky tests being a problem this year.
Yeah, and now I think that should have been one of my top trends, like, because you're right. I mean, I think it was really great to see that kind of emphasis kind of shift over this year. I think people are more like number one aware of testing, but also like the way they're talking about it, kind of becoming more aware and in tune and mature. So I know for what we see at Circle CI, and it's interesting, Luke's talking about right sizing, because yes, everyone wants everything to go faster, and you do want to have this like optimal size of pipeline and bring stuff through. But what we see actually is that 10 minutes is about what we think is the optimal time that you'd have for a pipeline run. And if you are finding that things are running well and you're under that 10-minute benchmark, it might be that you do have more space to add more tests and be a little bit more aware about what else you can put in so that you're doing really good test-driven development. And certainly, I think what I've seen in terms of flaky tests is that we've moved a lot from, I think there's a default of, oh, it's flaky, I'll just rerun. And I think that's still maybe what a lot of
Or turn it
people
off.
do. Like,
We don't need no
do I
tests.
really need that? But yeah, but like the more now that there are more metrics, there are more faster feedback loops, there are more flags for folks to say, okay, something's wrong, maybe I need to do something different here. That's all helping, I think, design things better and ultimately make things that will run faster for us. But yeah, I think there's a lot done this year and more emphasis to come in the coming year.
Yeah,
I,
so
I can see
let's.
a massive change with tests because I think as let's just say it, there's been a lot of leaning out of a lot of different companies, especially around the 200 to about 5,000 person startup. Like we've been seeing almost daily, oh, you now get 20% less people. Surprise. And I can see automating testing, in a lot of places. Oh, well, we do CI now. We don't need a QA department. We don't need those things. So I think a lot of people, we're going to have to do more and more automation because, quite frankly, if we don't, um, yeah, we're being asked to do more with less, and I think we're
Yeah,
going to be asked to do more with less as an industry as a whole. And the only way that we're going to survive is automation.
yeah. I think yeah, automation and trying to integrate all the different tools is and in one pipeline. You push your code and the whole thing runs like that's but having like scanners in that and not like having it as a different part of the pipeline is that's something that we've seen anyway, and that's one of the reasons why we added security scanners in Cloudsmith to check for vulnerabilities. But okay, so we have a poll. What do you think is the biggest trend in DevOps in 2022? And I gave people a few different uh, answers here, or a few different possibilities. Bringing automated security like scanners into your CI, AI driven tools to help devs write code. I think maybe a bit early for that, but it's multi cloud, supply chain security, or serverless. So bringing automated security like scanners into your CI has gotten the most answers there. And also multi cloud is pretty big. So I feel like this year I'm hearing less about hybrid cloud and more about multi cloud. So maybe like on prem is not as is losing traction and sort of. But how about you guys? What do you think about multi
I
cloud?
I disagree on the on-prem going away. I actually think
Yeah.
multi-cloud is actually the combination of on-prem as a cloud. You've got tools from Nutanix,
Okay.
hyperconverged
Yeah.
infrastructure. A lot of stuff is going to be brought in as we've been all following the drama. They have two data centers that are there. They don't use. I think they burst out into clouds, but infrastructure has been kind of published online, which is actually really interesting. It's been kind of neat to see under the hood of there. There's been some great Reddit posts by people that used to work there about how they actually set their infrastructure up and how they've actually been able to survive after losing 50% of the people because they actually have a well set up infrastructure. Um, but this idea of multi-cloud where you can move your load to any cloud that you need to depending on cost. And if you're going to do Black Friday, you might have your on-prem, you might have it in Google, you might have it in Amazon, you might have it in DigitalOcean, you might have it all over the place so that you can serve the customer as you need for that big day. But then you might collapse back down onto just on-prem because that's enough to take your day to day. And it's usually on-prem tends to be cheaper in the long run at a certain size and scale. Usually when you've got a certain set of users, um, the public clouds become very cost prohibitive, and you're better off to do using a burst model versus an on-prem. Like, and then you also got other places like Walmart does a lot of really good stuff on-prem and with the private cloud because they don't want to give money to their competitor. And then
Oh,
also
of
federal
course.
government.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff banking. On-prem's not going away. It's going to be where you can burst to, and what type of security you need. But that's why multi-cloud I think is changing from this hybrid idea.
A total
Yeah.
+1 to that. And I think as well with the on-premise, there may even be certain industries where they'll never be in the cloud. You know, like there are just certain things, like maybe you're on an oil rig, maybe you're in aerospace. It just will never make sense to be in that cloud. So there is that portion. But I do see, if we're looking at the numbers, like there is more adoption of the cloud, but there'll be always be a certain portion. It doesn't go away. And maybe even it'll make sense that there's certain types of compute that you want to have in-house. Like I know M1 is kind of a hot topic since it's launched there a while back, and that might be something that folks want to have in-house. And if they want to configure for specific types of compute, I think that's something I've seen a few articles say that like coming in 2023, we're going to have more options in the cloud to have more configurable resources. So there'll be more options for folks to do that way. And maybe it's even also a little bit of an evolution. So like I know edge computing is different, but you know, you're going to be having data centers in places, kind of like you're saying, is like in places they weren't before, you know. So the nature might be changing. Kind of, we saw the evolution of platform teams. We might be seeing an evolution in how people use multi-cloud here as well. One other point maybe on multi-cloud that I think will make it be a focus for next year is that there's been rumblings that I've seen in newspapers and in news articles, like tracking legislation, at least in the US, that say that we might, companies of a certain size, say like the Fortune 50s and Fortune 500s, will have to adopt a multi-cloud strategy, kind of as a best practice, resilience kind of strategy. So there may even be other reasons why folks might want to invest in multi-cloud strategy beyond looking for costs. But
Yeah,
I
I
think we'll
think the
see more
US
of
Yeah.
it.
government took on Google Cloud, or that's one of their possible options with
Are
cloud
we
there
talking about
just
the Jedi
recently.
contract?
Was that it? Was that
Yeah,
it?
yeah, the Jedi contract that everybody's been. Yeah, that's a whole mess because it's been kicked between all three of the majors. Um, and I actually know, yeah, it's been interesting stuff. I actually think one of the more interesting, like where you're saying about cost, is another factor. Vegas casinos, they actually run two. Each casino has to run two on-prem data center because locally because of regulations, and then they burst out to cloud as well. So all your slot machines, everything in Vegas is a computer, and it's kind of like a great example of a massive edge network. All the cameras, all the stuff that's going into those things, and they're doing some really interesting stuff with fraud detection and image processing, and there's some crazy stuff going on in a lot of really interesting industries. And yeah, you need massive amounts of compute that you can burst out to.
Yeah. So, there's one thing I wanted to ask you, Luke, about. You had in your B have a report about the fastest programming languages to actually get a PR
Yeah,
merged.
yeah.
I love talking about different programming languages. It's kind of like a football team, you know, like
I almost think we might be starting to programming language. I don't know if they're a team is a good idea, but I almost feel like it might be starting to go into religion. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
because
Definitely
people,
cultures. They have different cultures
yeah.
in different, yeah.
It was an interesting report because Linear B, our main product is this metrics dashboard that you put in between your Jira or your sort of source of truth, your ticketing system, and your Git repo, and it actually monitors between, so it actually sees what's going on, and it can check and see what works planned, what works unplanned, how are you reaching your goals. It's a lot in a lot of ways. One of the things I like, that the easiest way I explain it, it's kind of like how Salesforce works for monitoring your sales team. This works for monitoring your engineering teams. And one thing we're really clear on is it monitors teams. We don't go down to the individual developers because that's just a way to destroy your culture. No one wants to be stack ranked, right? So it's very much at the team base. But what we found is, yeah, different languages take a lot longer to code review, and like C++ and anything where you're doing your own memory management, I see that taking a lot more time because it's such a much more difficult stuff to code. Whereas if something's really abstract and there's a lot of really easy tooling, good linting stuff, good stuff like Visual Studio Code that can do your debugging for you, um, your review cycle shorter because a lot of the times the developer is catching stuff in the writing of it faster because you got more tooling to help you find the bugs
Yes.
before they get merged or before they
And
get
it kind
committed.
of ties into that, like improving developers' efficiency and quality of code using tools. It kind of ties back into that, because I was surprised to see Java and C# at the top of that list, but it's because they have a great amount of tooling that works with them, just integrates with their IDs, that it's like they're at like 15 hours, which is
Mm-hmm.
in comparison to like the average of 40 from that report. Is like, it's that's really impressive.
Well, and I think a lot of those languages are also going specifically into, you know, client server applications and stuff. There's not there, whereas a lot of the other ones are focused with web and different interfaces. So there's a lot of there might be less
There's
stuff less
yeah,
stuff to test, and there's just more, you know, there's just a lot of, they're both also more mature languages that have a lot of really great tooling like that, you know. And that's a big trend, um, you know, and that's, you know, JavaScript and TypeScript, those are both I find it interesting that TypeScript is longer than um, what you call it, longer than JavaScript, you know, if it being a little stronger typed and stuff, but
yeah. Maybe it's like JavaScript is, maybe it's not as reviewed as
we always have a joke, you know, why you want to do smaller pull requests. 10-line pull request, someone's going to go through and complain about tabs and spaces and white spaces and spelling mistakes. If it's a 500 review pull request, LGTM looks good to me, and it's sent, right? And that's the thing we
merge.
don't want to
Yeah,
have. And
and I
so
suppose
maybe,
it goes into like different cultures that these languages have. Maybe some other languages have a more thorough process, and maybe it's because what they're doing is more uh, system critical or something like that. Like so, but okay. Well, I want to talk about one last thing before we go. Is like uh, AI and software development. Do we feel like that was a trend this year? Do we think that like there was? Do people use AI in software development? Do like, I know there's GitHub Copilot, and actually, Ashley, did Circle CI, what did you acquired some AI
Pony
tool?
code. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting year from an AI perspective. Like, it's another one that I think everyone was really excited at the start of the year that there's going to be just AI everywhere. And I see AI coming in. Like, we do see it being becoming something that there's progress being made on. But I'd say it's not quite at the stage where it's taking over everything. I
yeah,
mean, every time I chat with my new friends from Phonycode, they're part of Circle CI now. I get really excited about what they're doing and the ways they can help in config to make things easier. And Visual Studio Code extension that was launched recently does a lot to kind of help on the efficiency side. But I think it's still something when we talk about AI, it's something that can have the ability to help. I think I've seen a lot of reports where people say when they use AI, they're happier and they feel more confident, but also at the end of it, the code might not be as secure. And I think that's
oh.
something that
Is it
that
because you don't understand it, or is it because maybe you're repeating yourself more because it's like, yeah, like you don't need to, because you're not writing it yourself or something, that you're like uh it's you might have bits of code that are similar in different places. Is that is do people is that a problem, or
I think that there can be those kinds of problems, and that's where I think anyone thinking about, okay, how should we implement this? It should be done with a very reasoned approach. It's not just, yeah, adopt and go. I think this is something that will need a lot of kind of working behind the scenes, checking if it works for your own specific use case, and some gotchas that might get you along the way, like some of the stuff that you're talking about, Kira.
yeah,
yeah,
I think there's some really interesting stuff with AI, um, especially about ownership. You know, like that's
yeah,
a really big question. Like
there's
we've been
something in the
seeing it.
courts, right? Isn't there some
Um,
lawsuit with
I haven't
someone?
seen. I don't think it's gotten fully tested to the courts
Oh,
yet
okay.
because American copyright law and European copyright law and world copyright law is all a mess. But there's also, you know, um, you know, it's like if you adopt a code from an npm repo into your thing, or you know, you're pulling it from that. How is it owned? How is it licensed? Is that GPL being infectious? There's all kinds of different things with licensing that AI has to take into account, and if the AI algorithm's wrong, you could end up there's a big risk there. You can end up having to open source massive parts um, um, of your code actually having to now be open source because you sucked in some code that actually was GPL'd, and there can be some real issues. And like we're starting to see some interesting stuff with this big trend with, I think it's Lenza, of all these people posting, you load 20 pictures and then AI spits back a whole bunch of other pictures. um,
Oh yeah.
some are really interesting, some are really fascinating. John Oliver did a really great segment on AI doing images with him and such, but I'm wondering how that's going to look for code, and if the images that come back are slightly off and slightly crazy and slightly things, um, how much is it going to work with code and rights? And yeah, there's just a lot of it, I feel like we're at the cusp here of it's going to happen. Putting the genie back in the bottle isn't going to happen. Computers, algorithms are going to there, but it's what type of controls are being going to put on it, who owns what. If AI, if the AI pulls up a license of something and it brings it into your code, how is the compensation done? Is it infectious? I think there's just a whole lot of rules that really need to be looked at. And again, going back onto the human rules rather than relying all on the computers. We have to set the rules up before the sooner we set the rules up, the regulations. Otherwise, we end up basically like what we've got with crypto, right? We have a fully unregulated market that's causing lots and lots of pain right now. Um,
Yeah, that's
and this also,
difficult to understand what's happening, I suppose. Is
yeah. And it's
yeah.
the same way the stock market happened in the 20s. As things mature, regulations and rules and guidelines have to get created, because if you don't have the boxes drawn around, you keep breaking out of them and hurting people.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
remember seeing an article that said the age of the high school essay is dead because of GPT. And
Oh
I don't know
yeah.
if you've played with it, but I mean, some of the stuff it comes back with can be kind of on the money, and then other things it just completely computer
Actually,
says
for this
no.
webinar, I was like, what are the trends in 2022 for DevOps? But they didn't tell me because it was like, oh, my data is from 2021 or something. But I was like, oh, I could.
Could have been so easy.
It could have been so easy, yeah.
Cancel the webinar. It's okay. I got the
Cancel.
answers.
Yeah. All right. What about one last thing? I promise it's the last thing. What do you think are the trends in open source this year? Or is it one of the trends? I think is like it's been 2 years since SolarWinds, which was a big software supply chain hack, and we've kind of it's helped us, even though I don't think that was to do with open source, but it's kind of helped us realize how dependent code is on open source. And this year I feel like there's more tooling around that and more like software frameworks to help us be more secure while using open source. What do you guys think? Or
It's definitely a lot of activity happening in open source this year. And I guess to start on that point, the Open Policy Agent is I know a software or an open source project that I'm starting to see crop up in a lot of different places, and it's great to see that kind of adoption. And especially even if I look at how that's being adopted, the Linux Foundation does amazing metrics and research on how tools are being adopted by different companies, and particularly I see in like finance, accounting, those kinds of companies that's they're using more open policy agent rules. So that's one. Another one, it's been really great to see so many open source tools in the kind of software delivery side graduate. So we saw like Argo, Tecton,
yeah.
I think FluxCD, like, so it's again going back to I think the maturity that we're seeing in our industry. So a lot happened this year for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think open source as a whole is healthier, and um, especially when it comes to security. I think the old idea of, oh, people just can't see your code, that's what makes it secure, is going away, and people, you know, they don't have, the level of trust that the industry has for other people's code um, is lower than it probably has ever been, and therefore being able to actually see this close. And and this is right now we're giving away Gitstream for free, but it's a closed source product as we're working on building it, because frankly, we don't want to open it up until and people look at our code until we've got it into a solid product and it, is well documented and looks good. Because when you open source something, you better look good, or else people are going to if you're not up to a standard, people are gonna say, huh, how did that works that way? That's kind of interesting. Why did you make that decision? If they're being nice. If they're not being nice, well,
Yeah, so I suppose another reason, you talk about trust and how we have less trust in code, and I suppose that's where all this stuff about signing is coming in, and getting some metadata from your build tool, like your CI, C2, and kind of using that to build a picture of how the software is built. And that's like big for Cloudsmith as well. So I think that's huge this year. Supply chain security and signing and open source tools to help you secure, and also to secure your code. So yeah, there's a lot in 2022. So I think we'll end it up just there. We have a few prizes, so let's see. Hillary, she has them on the bounce. She's great. Okay, so she's put them in the chat there, and we have a prize pack for Parth Civitas, for Robert Jacob B, and for Mary Kniff. We have another prize pack for Neko Fujikawa. I'm so sorry for butchering people's names. And we have a free lunch for Mike Sorensen. So Hillary's going to reach out to you guys after the event. And so thanks for everybody for coming to the webinar. The next one is on in January, and it's going to be predictions for 2023. Of course, this one was what happened in 2022, so the next webinar has to be on predictions. And the person moderating it will be Dan McKinney, because I'm going to go on maternity leave. I'll be gone for a few months. But before we leave, I want to say thank you so much to our wonderful guests, Aisling and Luke. You guys have been insightful and interesting, and we're delighted that you came on. I want to say a huge thank you to Hillary, behind the scenes, working away, like making the plates all spin. And we just want to say thanks for everybody for listening. It's been one of my favorite ones, so it's a nice one to end the year on. So thanks everybody. So see you later.
Had a blast. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. That was great.
To the winners.
Yes.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye everyone.